Speaking of sickle cell disease, Dr. Dion Way, you had something you want to say about that? Again.
Yeah, going back to the fact that, a lot sort of unites uh, African Americans and Africans when it comes to our genetics and the kinds of disease that we have. There's a very interesting study that looked at the genetics of African Americans, being that African Americans, because of the history, the historical context of slavery, African Americans do have some European genetics, some of them, 20 to 30%. So this study looked at sickle cell anemia in African Americans, and then it compared that to sort of the sickle cell trait and sickle cell in European DNA, and then in Western African DNA and genetics. And what they found is that African Americans who have sickle cell anemia in this country, their genetic makeup is more similar to West African genetic makeup, particularly the Yoruba genetics, Bantu and Mandeka in Western Africa, those populations, but particularly this genetic population of people who are in Africa, America, their genetics mirrors more so West African genetics rather than European genetics. So it shows us again that we are quite in fact linked. And it's so interesting that genetically we're similar, but then environmentally, we are more similar than we are different.
That is interesting. That is interesting. Not surprising though, because West Africa is the birthplace of sickle cell disease, and sickle cell disease is primarily a Black condition. And of course, the most number of Black people in the world are in, yes, indeed, Nigeria. We carry the prize. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right, we have to talk about cancer now. So cancer amongst Blacks, big problem. Many people don't really realize it. Lung cancer is the top cause of cancer death in the world. Blacks have a huge percentage of that. Prostate cancer, Black men. Breast cancer, Black women. Colon cancer, worse in Blacks. What is going on? Doc? Susan?
Well, sort of, it's a bit of the same thing. There is some genetics there, especially with, for example, lung cancer. Studies show that taken in the United States, while Black American men tend to have higher incidence of lung cancer, they are not necessarily more prone to smoking than white people. Right. So it goes to show, and we talk about smoking being a huge risk factor for lung cancer, but yet here we have a group of people that don't smoke more than another group of people, in fact, smoke less. Right. They're the ones that tend to have a higher incidence of lung cancer. When you talk about cancers, yes, genetics, I believe, plays a larger factor versus like when we talked about diabetes, where genetics was more of a minor factor because that's more of a lifestyle disease. When you look at cancers, yes, environment definitely plays a role, but I think genetics is key here. Same thing when you talk about breast cancer. What do we know about breast cancer in Black women? Black women tend to have more mutations in what are known as breast cancer genes. There's two kinds, breast cancer 1 and breast cancer 2 gene. Black women tend to have more mutations that can lead to breast cancer versus non-Black women. And then on top of that, when Black women have breast cancer, they unfortunately get the absolute worst kind, the kind that is most aggressive, which is called triple negative breast cancer. And that boils down to genetics, unfortunately. So for this arena, especially when it comes to cancers, genetics, unfortunately, is something we can't escape.
Okay, so I hear that, but I also hear the fact that, I mean, you being a lifestyle medicine doctor too can appreciate this more than the typical oncologist, the average oncologist, because there's got to be something that one can do. Yes, there's the tyranny of the genes, but it doesn't mean that no matter what you do, it's going to happen that way. I mean, except of course, if you're born with an XY as opposed to an XS, no matter what you do, you're going to be an XY. I mean, that would be argued in the United States that yes, you can still do something about that. But in general, you can do something about your genes, whether they are expressed, whether the bad ones are expressed or not. So some of the things that I hear about, and please feel free to correct or jump in, is that for women, you want to ensure that you try to keep a healthy weight. You want to check your family tree, because many times you can find out if your mother or your grandmother had breast cancer, and then you can find out and then do something about it. And of course, you want to build your immune system. You want to make sure that if you're not taking all the right foods, if you, for any reason you can't keep a healthy diet, you should keep a healthy diet, but at the same time, you've got to ensure that your immune system is strengthened. I mean, I personally have been all over the country in the worst hotspots, COVID-19 hotspots. But I know that I'm at risk, and so I'm ensuring that I'm taking high doses of everything to ensure, and this is still safe, I know what I'm doing, to ensure that the immune system is strengthened. What else can we do to ensure that, well, you can't ensure, but at least let's do our part to hopefully keep healthy and not be a statistic, because these statistics are absolutely ridiculous and alarming.
You're absolutely right about that. And it all boils down to being vigilant. You know, the last show we talked about health literacy, and that's really people understanding what things impact their health. In order to do all you can to prevent these diseases, you have to be aware of your health, be aware of your health history and your family's history, because we've already done a good job showing that some diseases traffic in our genes. And that definitely, applies even more so when we talk about our immediate family. If you have a family member that has cancer or multiple family members that have cancer, that means you have to be more vigilant. If you, live in an area where cancer is more prevalent, because sometimes we've seen that certain environmental factors have caused cancer to sprout in different communities, you have to be more vigilant. You have to look at yourself and be honest and say, well, what are my risk factors? Is my diet a bad risk factor? Is my lack of exercise a bad risk factor? Is the fact that I have vices such as smoking and alcohol use risk factors? And then when you've identified what risks are pertinent to you, it's really up to you to say, you know what, that's not acceptable to have these risk factors in my life, and I want to change them. And that's one of the things in lifestyle medicine that we talk about. This idea of lifestyle medicine is that you, the patient, you, the person, are in the driver's seat. We're here to help you along, but it really starts with your own willingness to make these lifestyle changes.